does the ugliest street in America look like? According to Life magazine, it was Speedway Boulevard in Tucson, Arizona in the 1970s. Now, why was it so ugly? In this photo, you can see that the street is littered with signs and billboards and lots of different typography styles. But I honestly think it's because nobody could imagine it better. A local Tucson artist named Allison Miller could imagine. She had a vision to beautify this street through public art and created the Speedway Corridor Mural Project. She collaborated with the University of Arizona Poetry Center and the Arts Foundation for Tucson and Southern Arizona. For this project, Allison brought together 6 local Tucson artists to paint 6 different murals near bus stops that were about a half a mile apart on this street that was once known as America's Ugliest. Each of these artists had their own artistic styles, levels of experience, and backgrounds. But the one thing they had in common is they were all Tucson-centric. And I was one of those Tucson artists. But here's the thing. My background is in digital arts. I'm a graphic designer. And I had only done a handful of public murals, so I was nervous. And I wondered, what was I going to create for my part in this collaboration? I started my process by staring at a blank wall, looking for inspiration. My canvas was 75 feet wide by about 5.5 feet tall and near a busy intersection with lots of foot traffic. I knew I wanted to make this bold and eye-catching, but also meaningful. This is going to live out in the community. About a week later, my dad gave me a belt buckle that had belonged to my grandfather. Now, my grandfather had grown up in Tucson as well, so this buckle had a very Tucson vibe. Those are from Tucson, It had a scorpion in the middle that was real, underneath this kind of glass dome. Then around the edges was this simple yet beautiful brass filigree. And I thought, this might make for a cool mural, and maybe I could do some sort of Western desert belt on my wall because it was so long and narrow. And so I start going down that path for my design, thinking of kind of these desert elements that I could paint on the wall. But the Poetry Center had an idea to connect poems written by local poets with our mural project. They sent each of us artists a list of poems to choose from, and on that list was one titled Reckon by Logan Phillips. I didn't know who Logan was at the time, but the title Reckon sounded like it might fit with my Western belt idea and evoke these images of the Southwest where I grew up. Here is Logan reading some of the words that really captured my attention.
Mud house, cracked adobe, and I was baby me, learning to walk and speak. Young mother and young father, the only young ones here in the boom town, so long busted. They left Tucson and bought in Tombstone, a set of almost ruins, a wood house and a mud house.
I myself grew up in a rustic adobe mud house. And when I was in high school, my dad worked on the Tombstone movie set as a carpenter. So I immediately felt a connection with this poem. And after reading the entire thing, I realized how remarkable this reflection of Tombstone was. And I needed to do research to figure out how these two worlds could come together. The poet talked about these actors walking around in costumes down in Tombstone. So I wanted to check that out. And I grabbed some friends and we drove down there. And in following the footsteps of the poem, we went
down Tough Nut to the Courthouse Museum, over to Allen Street, to the Birdcage Theater, and on back to the Mud House.
And in thinking of all these words from the poem, I was visually collecting anything that stuck out in my mind. There was the architecture from the Birdcage Theater, colorful stained glass in the shop windows, and wallpaper in the old saloons that was really neat, and also flowers at the Rose Tree Museum. We also wanted to check out the OK Corral. But by the time we had gotten over there, it was starting to get dark, and we found ourselves surrounded by sunsets. The sky lit up with the most gorgeous hues of yellow and orange and pink, and it was against that black silhouette of the horizon. And I thought, okay, whatever I'm going to create for this mural, this is going to be the color palette. And on the drive home, some of Logan's words kept repeating in my mind.
A couple dirt blocks away, Earp still circled in OK Corral in gunfights, gunfights, gunfights.
And I decided my little Western belt idea wasn't going to be enough. And this really needed to be a gun belt. But I didn't want to put guns in the holsters. That wasn't the right idea. The poet talked about this mannequin masculinity. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I could give the mural some sort of female energy to balance out the male dominance of Wild West culture. He also spoke of this cyclical high noon practicing the die slow. And I was like, okay, I've got it. I'm going to do this female outlaw in this high noon Wild West stance wearing a gun belt with flowers coming out of holsters. And then maybe I could draw some of like the elements of the poem like onto the belt design. And with this spark, I had my idea. Now the challenge was I had to bring it to life on paper. I ended up buying a costume gun belt off of Amazon. I used my husband as the model, and I started sketching. I recalled that filigree from the wallpaper in the old saloons and a rose from the Rose Tree Museum. Then the poem talked about things like a huckleberry, a bird of paradise, a marble rolling off the kitchen table, and a toy horse. And in bringing all of these elements from the poem together, I then grabbed my iPad and I started perfecting my sketch in Adobe Illustrator. And that's where I could bring in those colors from the sunset, touch up any of my line work, and then, add any other final details that I wanted to. And with all of that, my illustration was finished. But now I have to figure out how to get this on the wall. It's going to be a mural, right? Some of the other artists used the doodle method or the grid method or even freehanded their murals. But mine had a lot of intricate details, so I thought using a projector would work best. And one night, we set up my projector in the middle of Speedway in the median. Yeah. And we cast a digital image of my artwork across 3 lanes of traffic onto the wall. Now, I didn't know if we were going to get in trouble or not, so my friends and I quickly drew out the lines before anyone really noticed. And it worked. Our lines were on the wall, and it was finally time to paint. But painting a mural of this size is no small task, especially near a busy street. My painting partner and I spent many sun-soaked days and countless hours, probably most of March, now that I think about it, painting the wall by hand, layer by layer and color by color. And with this, creative collaboration between poetry and art, we helped beautify a street that was once known as ugly. The mural was ready. And in the words of Logan and of my artwork, ready not for revenge, but for my reckon.